The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with a palpable tension as representatives from numerous species filled the room, their voices blending into a chaotic symphony of debate and inquiry. This was not a typical assembly. Today's session had been convened in response to an extraordinary emergency. Humanity, known for its unpredictable nature and remarkable tenacity, had outright refused to engage in negotiations. Their refusal was straightforward and unyielding, but it carried weighty implications that resonated across the galaxy. For years, the Council had attempted to integrate humanity into its governance framework, hoping to bring them into alignment with galactic law. However, each effort was met with polite indifference or, more recently, blunt rejections. Now, this complete refusal had pushed the Council to its limits. In the center of the chamber, an elder diplomat from a species known for its negotiation skills raised a hand, signaling for silence. Gradually, the cacophony subsided, yet the tension remained evident in every stance and weary expression. Clearing his throat, he spoke with a steady but strained voice. "We have long held the belief that humanity would recognize the advantages of collaboration, that they would grasp the benefits of mutual cooperation. Yet they persist in their isolation, dismissing our authority as though it holds no significance." His statement was met with murmurs of agreement, though some council members shifted uncomfortably, sensing the gravity of the situation. Our peaceful attempts to assimilate them into our framework have been met with failure. They stand defiant, unafraid. A reptilian representative leaned forward, his scales shimmering under the dim lighting. Perhaps they believe they are invulnerable. They have enjoyed too much autonomy, leading them to think they are beyond our reach. His challenging gaze swept across the room, filled with disdain. Are we to be seen as a council that tolerates insolence and defiance? Another council member, her voice gentle yet edged with concern, chimed in, "Humans are not like the other species we encounter. They are inherently unpredictable. They show little regard for the traditions and structures that maintain stability in our galaxy. We have all witnessed their capabilities, how they adapt to environments that would spell doom for most of us. They flourish amidst chaos." The room fell silent once more, as each member seemed to recall past events where humans had demonstrated their exceptional resilience and capacity for survival, transforming adversity into an art form. No other species had ever exhibited such adaptability. Humans not only endured harsh conditions but thrived in ways that others deemed impossible. They existed outside the confines of the Council's meticulously structured order, embodying something entirely unique, something unpredictable and uncontrollable. Finally, a representative from a species celebrated for its technological advancements spoke up, his tone tinged with frustration. "They dismiss our technology, our diplomatic efforts, our laws. They choose to remain apart, isolated. What do they hope to achieve by rejecting us? They must understand they cannot withstand the entire Council," he declared, though his confidence faltered slightly, a crack evident in his tone. As he spoke, a murmur of dissent rippled through a group at the back. An elder representative from a smaller, less powerful system shook his head slowly. "Their refusal isn't born of arrogance. It runs deeper. Humans, they fear losing control over their own destiny. We misinterpret their actions because we project our values onto them. They are not rejecting us. They are protecting something we cannot perceive." This insight unsettled the chamber. It was one thing to view humanity's behavior as mere defiance. It was another to recognize that it might stem from a fundamentally different perspective, one alien to the Council itself. The realization that humanity had its own motives and priorities, which did not align with the Council's vision, was profoundly uncomfortable. "Enough with the speculation," a senior official interjected sharply. "Their refusal jeopardizes us all. We cannot permit them to set a precedent for others to follow. If we do, we risk others perceiving this defiance as a pathway to independence." His tone grew more resolute. "If we allow this, we invite insurrection. Our order will collapse." The fear in the room was palpable. Humanity posed a threat not solely because of their strength, but because they were rewriting the rules of the galaxy simply by existing outside the Council's authority. It was more than a rejection of governance. It was about the example they set. If they could thrive beyond the Council's influence, who else might attempt to do the same? The elder member raised his voice once more, striving for calm. "We have exhausted reason, logic, and diplomacy, and they have turned their backs on all of it. But we must not act impulsively. Humans, for all their unpredictability, are not mindless aggressors. They operate with intention, and we must comprehend that intention before resorting to drastic actions." His call for understanding sparked a muted debate. Some nodded in agreement, recognizing the wisdom in exercising patience. Others, however, felt that the time for understanding had long passed. They sought control, a way to remind remind humanity that independence was an illusion in a galaxy governed by shared laws. They needed to demonstrate that defiance carried consequences. One representative muttered, frustration lacing his voice, if they refuse to cooperate, they will find themselves alone against the will of the galaxy. In the back of the chamber, a quiet voice cut through the rising tension. What if they aren't afraid of that? The question hung heavily in the air, a chilling possibility that no one wanted to confront, that humans might genuinely be prepared to stand alone, unyielding in the face of the Council's might, valuing their autonomy above any alliance or protection the Council could offer. A long silence enveloped the Council members as they grappled with this unsettling reality. Humanity's refusal to engage in negotiations was no mere oversight. It was a calculated declaration of their intent to reject the constraints imposed by the Galactic Council. For the first time, the Council found itself grappling with a profound realization. They could not instill fear in humans. As the session drew to a close, an uncomfortable silence enveloped the chamber, with each member retreating into their thoughts, re-evaluating their understanding of authority and dominance. They felt, perhaps for the first time, the weight of their limitations, confronted by a force that defied containment through political maneuvering or intimidation. As representatives filed out, one thought resonated in the stillness. Humanity was not seeking approval. They were boldly asserting their right to exist on their own terms. The Council had a choice: accept this reality or provoke a confrontation that could endanger their very existence. Humanity's historical narrative was one the Council had observed with a mix of intrigue and apprehension. They were latecomers on the galactic stage, arriving long after the ancient races that filled the Council chambers. Yet their influence was immediate and disruptive, a force that commanded attention, whether they desired it or not. Despite appearing delicate, confined to a single solar system until recently, humans possessed a determination that defied expectations. In their early days, humans did not seek alliances or protection. They did not beg for the Council's approval or diplomatic recognition. Instead, they forged ahead, expanding with relentless tenacity, adapting to harsh environments with a vigor that unsettled other species. While most civilizations followed a predictable path of exploration, settlement, and eventual reliance on Council resources, humanity took the opposite route. They moved swiftly and with purpose, maintaining their independence. Where others perceived uncertainty, they discovered opportunity. Tales of human resilience became frequent topics of quiet conversation among Council members. Many had witnessed their tenacity firsthand. Stories circulated about humans thriving in conditions that would have doomed other species. Their ability to adapt was extraordinary, bordering on unnerving. This resilience was not merely physical. It stemmed from their mental fortitude and an insatiable drive to overcome challenges and transform hostile worlds into habitable ones. They didn't adapt solely out of necessity. They flourished because of it. One incident lingered particularly in the Council's collective memory. An exploratory mission involving a human crew had gone disastrously awry on a remote, toxic planet. Given the radiation and extreme temperatures, survival was deemed impossible by Council standards, and the recovery team prepared to collect only remains. However, upon arrival, they discovered the human crew alive, ingeniously repurposing ship debris into makeshift equipment and shelters. They had survived far beyond the projected limits, their indomitable spirit almost tangible. When questioned about their survival, the human leader simply shrugged and stated, giving up wasn't an option. That was the unsettling truth, this relentless drive that rejected defeat. The essence of humanity was a resilience that defied reason and science alike. Council researchers had attempted to analyze this trait, to pinpoint what made humans so distinct. But the answer eluded them. Humans were tireless, occasionally reckless. They crossed lines, disregarded advice, sometimes achieving incredible results, sometimes failing spectacularly, but rarely regretting the risks they took. It was as though they were driven by an unshakable conviction that no obstacle was insurmountable with enough effort. This reputation grew over time, and so did the Council's intrigue. Initially, they were simply curious, but this quickly turned into apprehension. Diplomatic overtures were made to reach out to humanity, offering a structured place in the intergalactic community, as was done for all emerging civilizations. Yet, humanity's response was distant, courteous, but uninterested. They listened politely, nodded at Council representatives, then continued on their own course, seemingly indifferent to the Council's offers of mentorship and support. Diplomatic envoys sent to Earth frequently returned bewildered, uncertain of how to interpret humanity's reactions. Had they been gently dismissed or simply overlooked? Humanity's disregard for Council regulations and conventions baffled them. Most civilizations, upon first contact, embraced the Council's guidance, finding comfort in its established order. But humans seemed to perceive it as a hindrance. What others saw as stability, humans saw as constraint. The council couldn't shake a growing unease over this attitude. An independent species was acceptable, but one that viewed their authority as an impediment rather than a foundation was potentially disruptive. Then the incidents began, disagreements over contested zones and misunderstandings that swiftly escalated into skirmishes. Humanity's response was decisive, swift, and unyielding. They didn't wait for permission or council intervention. They acted on their own instincts, and each encounter followed a familiar pattern. Humanity fought, but they did not seek to dominate. They defended, but they did not instigate. It was as if they operated by a single principle: to be left in peace. After each clash, they sent the same message, a clear and unwavering statement of their desire for independence and self-determination, a plea to chart their own path without interference. The Council, renowned for its diplomacy, found humanity's bluntness both refreshing and disconcerting. Humans had little interest in diplomacy as a tradition. They viewed it solely as a tool, and if the outcome was unclear or unsatisfactory, they abandoned it without hesitation. Council members attempted to understand this pattern, to decipher the roots of humanity's resistance. They delved into human history, studying their culture, their wars, and their social conflicts. What they uncovered was a history of independence, a tendency to reject control with a passion bordering on obsession. From revolutions to uprisings, humanity had repeatedly fought against domination. Control was something humans instinctively rebelled against, as if it was an affront to a principle they held dear. This realization unsettled the Council more than any military show of force could. Humanity was not merely resilient, they were unbreakable. Humanity's sense of identity ran so deep that they would rather face obliteration than bend to another's will. No matter how many times the Council reached out, offering unity, shared resources, and security, humans only seemed to withdraw further, determined to chart their own path. Frustration in the Council turned to fear. Humanity's defiance wasn't born of miscommunication or a lack of diplomatic skill. It was a deliberate choice, rooted in a belief that their independence was non-negotiable. They wanted no part in the Council's oversight, no share in the alliances binding the galaxy together. To them, such unity was simply a cage, and it was this that left the Council baffled. Questioning the Council was one thing, but to outright defy the very idea of galactic cohesion felt almost sacrilegious. This stance forced the Council into a corner they hadn't anticipated. Humanity couldn't be persuaded, and every attempt only deepened their determination. They were unlike any species the Council had encountered, not because of physical power or resources, but due to a will that rejected any authority beyond their own. As debates raged in the Council chamber, opinions grew louder, increasingly desperate. Some members urged for punishment to make an example of this rogue species, but others feared retaliation, worried that such a move could spark a conflict they weren't certain they'd win. Humanity's unpredictability, their refusal to adhere to any established norms, made each decision a gamble. The Council's usual strategies, the careful calculations of diplomacy, were useless. In time, one truth became glaringly evident in those chambers. Humanity didn't need the Council. They had developed, adapted, and thrived without external guidance, and they would continue to do so whether they were approved or not. Humanity wasn't asking for permission. They were demanding respect, a place among the stars on their own terms. And though this unsettled the Council, they couldn't deny it any longer. Humanity wasn't simply an emerging species in need of guidance. They had become an independent force, one that would shape the galaxy through sheer existence, not approval. After countless rounds of diplomacy, each offer more generous than the last, humanity's response remained firm and unwavering: no. In a final effort to avoid direct conflict, the Council dispatched a highly respected envoy, a seasoned diplomat skilled in negotiation, to meet humanity face-to-face and present the Council's latest proposal. It was an offer that would be irresistible to nearly every other species: vast resources, military protection, and an influential voice in the Council's decisions. The delegate arrived at a neutral station on a barren moon orbiting the human-held sector, the closest the humans would allow. This boundary, firmly established, was respected by both sides. The station, simple and utilitarian, reflected humanity's preference for function over form, a testament to their priorities and a quiet reminder that they, too, would remain unyielding. The delegate, accustomed to the grandeur of the Council chambers, found the setting unwelcoming, stripped down to an unsettling efficiency. When the human representative arrived, they skipped the usual niceties, offering no grand greetings or diplomatic formalities. They simply took their seat, exuding a quiet, steady confidence that unsettled the delegate, who could almost feel the intensity for which humans were known in the tense silence that followed. Clearing their throat, the delegate launched into the Council's offer with the practiced precision that years of negotiations had instilled. The council was prepared to welcome humanity as a full-fledged member, granting them access to valuable resources, advanced technologies, and even a degree of autonomy within their sector. The council was prepared to go beyond precedent, bending policies and adjusting rules, all to bring humanity under its protection. The delegate spoke with conviction, emphasizing the benefits and security such an alliance would offer. The human representative listened quietly, face impassive, their eyes fixed steadily on the delegate without a single reaction that hinted at their thoughts. When the delegate finished, a charged pause followed. The delegate waited, expecting questions or at least a sign that the human was weighing the proposal. Instead, the human leaned forward and, in a calm yet firm tone, responded, "Thank you, but our position is unchanged. Humanity will not be joining the Galactic Council." The delegate felt a jolt of surprise, struggling to mask their shock. They had anticipated hesitation, perhaps the need for more concessions, but not an outright refusal. Stifling a flash of frustration, the delegate pressed on, rephrasing the proposal. Surely the humans could appreciate the advantages, the resources they had yet to develop, the security from looming threats, the opportunity to be part of the larger galactic society. The human, however, merely shook their head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching their lips. "We don't require the Council's protection," they said calmly. "We've faced challenges alone, adapted and thrived without outside help. We can provide for ourselves. As for integration, we have our own ways, our own path. We don't need the Council's approval to succeed." There was no hint of arrogance or anger in their voice, only a calm, unwavering certainty. To them, the Council's offer was simply irrelevant, a gilded cage they had no intention of entering. An uneasy awareness began to rise in the delegate, the realization that humans viewed themselves as neither above nor below the Council's influence, but entirely outside of it. Pivoting, the delegate tried to appeal on a more personal level, speaking of unity, shared progress, and the prosperity that could arise from standing together. Yet the human's expression remained unchanged, resolute and unaffected by promises of security or comfort. The delegate's words seemed to glide past them, as if they had already heard every argument and had long made up their mind. "You misunderstand us," the human finally spoke, cutting through the delegate's carefully crafted arguments. "Our refusal isn't born of hostility. We simply have no desire to relinquish our autonomy or conform to a structure that restrains us. The Council's order may work for others, but it's not our path. We choose our risks, and we choose to face the consequences ourselves." The straightforwardness of the statement left the delegate temporarily speechless. The humans weren't asserting dominance, nor were they dismissive. They didn't place themselves above the Council, but rather saw themselves outside its scope, a people following a different compass, one that diverged from galactic norms and regulations. And in that gap lay the root of the Council's discomfort. Humanity wasn't merely turning down membership. They were affirming a way of life that fundamentally questioned the Council's assumptions of unity and control. Sensing their position slipping, the delegate tried again, emphasizing the value of cooperation, shared resources, and pooled knowledge. Yet the human's expression remained resolute, unshaken. The Council's greatest assets, its influence, resources, and security, seemed to hold no sway. "We appreciate the Council's overtures," the human concluded, their voice polite but unwavering. "But we're unwilling to trade our freedom, even for the benefits you promise. Autonomy is not negotiable." A pang of frustration surged through the delegate, verging on desperation. How could they convey the dangers of isolation, the threats it would invite? Yet the humans seemed almost amused by the delegate's insistence, as if they grasped something beyond the reach of Council diplomacy and rhetoric. "It's not that we ignore the risks," the human said, sensing the delegate's mounting anxiety. "We know what it means to stand alone, to reject the shelter that the Council offers. But we're willing to embrace that risk, to live by our choices, independent and ungoverned." Their words hung in the air, stark and unyielding, and the delegate felt a shiver of understanding. The Council's proposals were irrelevant because humanity was propelled by something deeper than security or success. What they prized was the freedom to stand independent, no matter the cost. For them, autonomy was priceless, worth every sacrifice and hardship, and no promise of protection or comfort could sway that resolve. Resigned, the delegate leaned back, recognizing that further arguments would be futile. Humanity Humanity's decision wasn't rooted in defiance or ego. It was a belief beyond bargaining. It was a fundamental truth, an indelible foundation that the Council's authority could never touch. Returning to the Council chambers, the Delegate carried a heavy awareness. A new force had emerged in the galaxy, one unlike any they'd encountered before. Humanity had chosen solitude, and for the first time, the Council's influence felt insignificant against such steadfast resolve. Then, as if to underscore this change, a transmission reached the Council's central chamber. A message from humanity itself, something that had never happened before. Humanity had never before initiated contact with the Council on their own terms. The transmission began plainly, without formalities or grand gestures, just the precise, unembellished clarity that had come to define humanity. Their representative laid out a position that rippled through the Council chamber, leaving no room for misinterpretation. To the Galactic Council, the message began, calm and direct. We recognize and respect your invitation to join in membership and unity. However, we are formally declining any offers of integration. Humanity places great value on independence, self-determination, and the right to chart our own path. A momentary silence punctuated the statement, each Council representative's face darkening with concern. Humanity's response wasn't a simple refusal. It was a declaration of their right to exist beyond the Council's reach. The message continued, unwavering. Since the beginning, we have chosen to develop on our terms. Your Council is an impressive institution, founded on principles of unity and collective oversight, but those principles do not align with our own. We operate by our own standards, and while we respect the Council's authority over its members, we do not recognize that authority over us. This stark renunciation of the Council's power struck deeply, shaking the institution's core tenet that all civilizations ultimately fell under a unified order. Humanity was rejecting more than membership. They were challenging the very idea that any civilization could claim governance over another without consent. We understand the risks of standing apart, the human representative continued. We accept that there are threats beyond our borders, and that isolation carries its own dangers. But we are prepared to face those consequences, whatever they may be. This is not a gesture of animosity. It is simply that we believe freedom, true freedom, only exists when a species can define its destiny without external interference. The finality of those words was inescapable. Humanity was prepared to endure hardship, isolation, and even existential threats if that was the price of maintaining their sovereignty. This wasn't a defiant or reckless refusal. It was a choice driven by principle, one they seemed ready to defend at all costs. Around the chamber, Council members exchanged glances, unspoken worry spreading among them. This was no naive decision from an uninformed species. Humanity had assessed the risks and chosen their path with full awareness. They didn't fear the Council. They were resolute in their willingness to face any repercussions. The message took on a firmer tone, resolute and unyielding. We do not wish for conflict with the Council, nor do we seek to provoke hostility. But let this be clear, we will defend our sovereignty, and we will not yield. Any attempt to impose your authority upon us will be met with resistance. The Council sat in stunned silence. Humanity wasn't threatening war, but their position left no doubt. Their stance was resolute. They would stand alone, ready to defend their independence against any force that sought to compromise it. They were prepared to defend their independence to the end, willing to go to unimaginable lengths to preserve it. The Council, which had long prided itself on diplomacy and unity, found itself caught off guard by such a blunt, unwavering declaration of sovereignty. The human message continued, each word a deliberate strike. We acknowledge the Council's commitment to peace and order among its member civilizations. The message read, but we are not a part of that mission, nor do we seek to be. Our history has taught us that peace is real only when it is freely chosen, not imposed. A sense of unease began to ripple through the Council, an institution accustomed to being the ultimate authority on interstellar governance. Humanity's decision to remain outside the Council's reach was more than a refusal. It was a challenge to the very principles upon which the Council was founded. Other species had occasionally resisted or questioned Council policies, but none had refused its jurisdiction outright. Yet here was humanity, standing alone, asserting an independence that edged into defiance. In a gesture of mutual respect, the message concluded, we ask that you cease any further efforts to bring us into your governance. We will not respond to additional negotiation on this issue. Our path is ours alone, and we will walk it with or without your blessing. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Council chambers in a heavy silence. The humans had stated their position unmistakably. Diplomacy, negotiation, alliance, all cast aside. The Council's usual tools of persuasion and compromise had no effect against humanity's uncompromising stance. A murmur spread spread through the room, as some representatives looked troubled, while others remained in deep contemplation. Humanity hadn't issued threats, nor had they shown disrespect for the Council's purpose. They had merely drawn a line, refusing to be ruled, their message unwavering and without a hint of doubt. At last, one council member spoke, voicing what many had been thinking. If humanity rejects our oversight, what's to stop other species from following their lead? They're not just challenging our authority, they're challenging the foundation of unified governance itself. The concern was tangible. Humanity's declaration of independence was a dangerous precedent. Other species might view humanity as a beacon, questioning the Council's control and seeking their own autonomy. Should enough civilizations choose a similar path, the Council's carefully maintained order could begin to unravel. Another, more cautious member raised a different concern. If we try to force them, we may provoke exactly the kind of conflict we've always worked to prevent. Humanity is unpredictable. They may stand alone, but they will not stand down. The implications were grave. Humanity's defiance threatened the Council's integrity, yet an attempt to coerce them might ignite a conflict capable of destabilizing the entire galaxy. It was a perilous dilemma with no simple solution. Humanity was a force the Council could neither disregard nor control. In the weighty silence that followed, a realization settled over the Council members. This was no longer just an issue of diplomacy. Humanity was not simply another species to be integrated or subdued. They had become something far more formidable, a living symbol of self-determination. And ideas, once sparked, were nearly impossible to extinguish. The Council grappled with a stark, unavoidable truth. Humanity would remain beyond their influence, an autonomous force pushing against the established order. They had issued no threats, made no promises, yet the resolve in their stance was undeniable. As the Council members sat in uneasy silence, one question lingered. How long could their control endure in a galaxy where humanity had charted its own course? The finality of humanity's broadcast hung in the chamber, each representative quietly absorbing the implications. Humanity hadn't simply refused the Council's invitation. They had done so with an unapologetic, unwavering clarity that struck at the Council's very core. For centuries, the Council had stood as the ultimate authority, a force of order and unity across the stars. Now, one species had removed itself from that order, its rejection like a fissure forming in the Council's very foundation. The silence began to break, murmurs growing as representatives reacted, each species responding differently to humanity's defiance. The more militaristic factions were quick to anger, voices rising in calls for a decisive response. For them, humanity was not merely defiant but a risk that had to be contained before it became a model for others. Do you not see? One of them pressed, his voice straining over the others. They're undermining everything we stand for. If we let them stand alone, other systems will start questioning their own loyalty. Our structure, our peace, it depends on unity, on cooperation. We cannot permit this rogue element to challenge it. Others, however, saw the threat in a different light. Humanity was unlike any civilization they had encountered, unpredictable, fiercely self-governing, and prepared to defend their independence at any cost. Attempting to force compliance could lead to a conflict far greater than any the Council had faced. If we try to subdue them, we risk war, another representative countered, his voice calm but resolute. They've shown their resolve. Humanity will not yield, not even to our combined might. To take action against them risks an escalation that could fracture everything we've worked for. The discussion shifted from humanity's stance to the larger implications. The Council forced, perhaps for the first time, to confront the fragility of its own influence. For so long, the Council had assumed its structure to be the best means of maintaining peace, that any society beyond its reach was simply awaiting integration. But humanity's choice had shattered that assumption. They had exposed a reality the Council had rarely acknowledged. Peace can only be peace when it is freely chosen. An elder representative finally spoke, her voice low but laced with conviction. Humanity is making us confront our limits. We cannot force their compliance, nor can we prevent others from witnessing their independence. If they succeed in standing apart, they'll show that the Council's power is not unbreakable, that unity is not the sole path. The weight of this insight settled over the room, stirring a mix of unease and indignation among the Council members. Humanity wasn't simply defying them. They were embodying a principle that threatened the very fabric of the Council's influence. This was more than a rejection. It was a testament to the power of self-determination. And if other species began to see humanity as a beacon, then the carefully constructed unity of the galaxy might never be the same. Humanity's message was a challenge, not of force but of ideals. They demanded something no civilization had dared claim, the right to true autonomy, a path chosen without Council oversight oversight or interference. This stance threatened the very bedrock of the Council's philosophy, and they felt the tremor deeply. Yet, as the debate wore on, a quiet realization took hold. Humanity's defiance had illuminated a vulnerability the Council had never anticipated, not in military strength, but in the perception of their own authority. Their power relied not on domination, but on the compliance of other species. And humanity had simply refused to comply. For all the Council's influence, they found themselves unable to bring the humans back into the fold without risking an upheaval of their entire order. A somber silence fell over the chamber, broken only by whispered exchanges. The Council had long operated on the belief that every civilization could be persuaded, whether by diplomacy or by strength. But humanity's choice to remain independent shattered that belief, exposing the Council's own limits. For the first time, they glimpsed the true extent of their influence, and where it ended. At last, one of the Council's most revered voices addressed the Assembly, her tone firm and unyielding. "We must acknowledge that humanity is beyond our reach. Any attempt to coerce them will not only fail but will weaken our standing across the galaxy. We must allow them to exist apart despite the risks." It was a decision taken reluctantly, and many remained unsettled. But as each representative weighed the alternatives, it became evident that forcing humanity's compliance would only strengthen their resolve, and perhaps ignite similar sentiments among others. They had no choice but to recognize humanity's autonomy, to respect their independence from a distance. It was an unexpected compromise, but the only option that wouldn't risk open rebellion, not only from humanity but from other species that might be watching. The Council dispersed in a state of solemnity, each representative confronting the new reality humanity had imposed upon them. They had encountered a civilization that couldn't be forced into submission, one that would rather stand alone than surrender its freedom. And as the Council members returned to their own systems, a weighty realization accompanied them. From that moment forward, humanity was known as the galaxy's rogue element, the species that had chosen an independent path separate from Council control. And in the back of every representative's mind lingered a quiet, unspoken fear. Would humanity's defiance inspire others to seek their own freedom as well?